All right, top of the morning to you.
How about it?
All right, we're back. Everybody should know you by now, but
Yeah.
you are.
I'm stuck in this room. Every now and then you come in and say you're ready to talk. No, I'm Rick Miller,
Yep.
and I'm with Pro 356, and more importantly today, I'm also a tiny habiteer.
Yep, that's right. And I'm Chris Francis, and I'm here to basically interview you. So you're the subject matter expert here.
So, well, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about habits today, is what you said. Let's talk about that. And along the way in my coaching career, I found that a lot of times you're coaching people or teams and you're trying to help them make changes. You know, we always want to have improvement in this or that. And it's usually a little bit harder than you think. You come up, oh, let's just do this. We'll institute that. And I discovered a guy out in Stanford named Dr. B.J. Fogg who had invented an approach to changing behaviors called tiny habits. And that's what we can talk about. Just so the readers or listeners can know, it's the same kind of approach that people may have heard of James Clear with atomic habits. Same concept.
Yeah. And I read both. I think there is some significant differences there. But,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's about doing things intentionally to build those habits.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's
And,
not just going to happen. Actually, it would happen. Mostly bad habits.
Yes.
Where those come from.
So maybe we can start by, Chris, if I asked you what's a habit, what would you say?
Ooh, you're going to put me on the spot. I think it's something that you do without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the definition I've heard is it's something that you are unconsciously competent at.
Okay.
So if I said raise your hand, go ahead. Okay? Why did you raise that hand? Because if I said raise the other hand.
Yeah. That's not the hand I normally raise.
When I said raise, all of
Yeah.
us do that. If you said, shake hands with somebody, you just naturally do things. You're very competent at it, but you don't think about it.
Yeah.
So one of the things, once you recognize that, I've also gone through a course where somebody sent me to it. I thought I was going for this, and I got that. And I learned about the fact that you can change habits, but you start with the idea, I want to change, and the first time you try to change something, you find out that you are consciously incompetent or incompetent.
Okay.
And so there's a process of going from consciously incompetent, which I relate to. Remember the first time you tried to get off a ski lift?
Wasn't that bad.
Okay, you were young and you're athletic. Okay, some of us decided to learn to ski without taking any lessons, and I was in New York, and I went off there, and I remember, okay, I know what I'm trying to do, but I am not competent.
Yeah.
If you keep going and work through it, you can eventually get to the point where you become, again, on the new habit, unconsciously competent. But it takes a while.
Okay.
And so what I learned was, okay, that sounds good. How do you do that? And what we talked about, and what I learned, and I actually, as I said, got certified in Dr. Fogg's approach, and that the title for that is You're a Tiny Habiteer. And his whole approach gets into how do you actually change your behaviors.
Okay.
Let me
Sure,
back
I'll
up, though,
forget.
because as you know, when you and I get going, I can skip ahead with the best of them.
All right.
Let me slow back
Yeah.
down and get into next thing is, okay, what is his approach? Because we talked about behavior or a habit is this. Well, let's talk about behavior, which is underlying, or tied to it. Behavior happens in his model when three things happen. When motivation and ability to do something intersect with the prompt.
So the B equals MAP.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So behavior equals motivation at the moment where motivation and ability to do what you're thinking of doing has a prompt. Best example I can give you is you're at a stoplight. Light it's red, turns green. What do?
You just hit the gas.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a habit. Now, are you motivated to keep moving?
Yeah.
Probably because there's somebody behind
And if
you.
not, they'll be motivating you with that
Yeah,
horn.
with that horn. Do you have the ability to put your foot on the gas and take it off the brake and go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the prompt was the green light.
Right.
Okay. So if you put that on a matrix, which if you go to the website, you'll see this presentation with some slides with it. You could see that if you said, okay, this is motivation going up and down, and this is ability going from hard to do to easy to do, and then here's the ability to do that. If you're highly motivated, you can probably do some things that are very hard to do. In other words, you've got somebody that's hanging in a tree, okay, that slipped out of the bucket or something. You're highly motivated. You know the danger. It's amazing how, even though it's hard for you to get up there, you will do it. It's hard to do, but you're that motivated, okay? On the other hand, if it's Friday afternoon and you need to do something that you're not very motivated at, I don't care. Let's say I'm ready to go and someone says, can you go back and rake that person's driveway, okay? You have the ability, but your motivation is so low, you go, nah. And so what you end up doing is that motivation goes up and down like the tide. Ability has to do with how long you've been doing it and whether or not it's easy to do. And the problem with most people trying to change their habits, I'm going to get rid of this, but this one I'm going to do something better, whether it's work or at home, is the fact that we generally try to we set a goal, something, a new behavior, when we're highly motivated. Think December, you get on the scales, I'm going to get in better shape. So my New Year's resolution, which is a new goal, is a new habit, is I'm going to start going to the gym and I'm going to lose 30 pounds. You ever heard that one?
Yeah, that's where gyms make all their money is, December, January, everybody signs up for a year membership and then they might go a few times and then they quit.
Yeah. You start out, you're highly motivated.
Yeah.
Man, you wake up on that Monday after New Year's, your motivation's high. I can get in the car. So that first day you go and you've got enough ability to get there. And so the motivation and the ability to do it is high enough to where you move across the action line and you're doing it. Next day, your motivation, you're a little bit sore. So the motivation goes down a little bit. You can still get there and you do it. Third day, somebody's sick at home, there's a problem at work, you're tired because now you've been doing it for 2 or 3 days and you go, oh, I'll just take a day off. And so your motivation went down and the ability to do it just went away.
Yeah, that's what happens. And then the next day, you're kind of out of the habit or you don't really have the habit developed yet.
And that other model I told you about, here's the other thing that happens. Most habits are living rent-free in your brain right now, Chris. Whatever you're doing, how you shake, they live there rent-free. And you just had this great idea, I'm going to change my habits. In fact, what you've done is given eviction notice to your old habit, your bad habit. You just gave it, mentally you said, you're out of here. I'm going to change this. I don't like the way that I want to be the new me. Guess what that rent-free resident in your head is going to do?
Try to stay there.
They're going to sit there on that rent-free 30-pound extra weight that's been living rent-free in your head that's called the eating cookie monster is going to start sending you on that third day when you're tired and somebody has a problem at work that you need to take care of. I told you couldn't do that. Why'd you think you could lose that weight? Chris, you can't do that. You got other things to do. That's way more important. And you'll start getting those thoughts like I just said in your head. And that's the part of when you have a habit, that habit isn't going to go away for free. And it's going to start sending you all those negative arrows, as I call them, into your psyche that says, no. And that's why, people quit. People start habits and they stop. And then they rationalize their stopping because what they've done is they've set a goal that is based on high motivation, and it's more difficult to do when you've got low motivation.
But we can't talk about good habits without talking about bad habits.
Yeah.
Too. I mean, you've got things that you do every day that you don't want to do or aren't good for you. If somebody's smoking, they've seen the Surgeon General's warning by now.
Right.
We know it's not good for you. But why do people do it?
Well, again, you're unconsciously competent. Your brain has been doing it so long that it is natural, and you've done it enough to where it's not easy to break something that is that streamlined. It's like the most efficient thing in your mind because a habit is something you don't have to think about. So we all want more habits. We just want good habits, and we want to get rid of the bad ones. And we'll get to that, because first we need to talk about how do you develop a new habit, and in the process we can show you how that same process works for getting rid of a bad habit. We just
Okay.
flip it. It's the
Yeah.
other. It's the other side of the same coin that Dr. Fogg put together that I think may be interesting to people. But one thing you can count on is you need to find ways to work through the negative thoughts, to where literally when you have that thought, I knew I couldn't do this, man. I have missed 4 days in a row. Why I don't want to go back. I'm going to feel bad, starting over at the gym, or I
We'll
thought,
just skip the rest of this week and we'll start fresh on Monday.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you do that and you put it off, then you get to Monday and you go, and it's just basically those negative thoughts where if you said, nope, I'm not quitting. I'm just going to keep going. And if you literally just kept saying to yourself, quit that, and you talk to yourself and say, I know you're in there, I'm kicking you out. That eviction notice was real, because you really are evicting an old habit. And so that's it. How do we actually start making that change and not be the person that quits the gym or says they're going to show up? Here's a better one. They're going to show up on work on time. Not that
Okay.
that's ever a problem in the tree business, but I know it happens in every business, everybody I know. So here's the model that Fogg put together. We've talked about B equals MAP, but there's another side of that, and that is the ABCs. What he talks about is, to start a new behavior, you first need to have something you can attach it to. Trying to when you're working on a tree, there's many things that you need to secure and attach to make sure that you can do the operation. You don't just go up there and cut a limb. There's a lot of things that you anchor down before you do that.
Okay.
Well, behaviors are generally best changed when you can anchor them to an existing habit that you don't want to get rid of. So what you do in that is you look at routines. What do you do every day? And you kind of, first step is write those down. And I shared that with some of your team, where when I was getting certified, said, what do I do from the time my alarm goes off to the time I go to work? And then what do I do at work? And I listed 60 different items that were amazingly routine. I mean, I get up, I walk down, I turn on the coffee, I open up the refrigerator, I grab a glass, I put it down, I put some lemon juice in it. All these steps, okay? So I looked at those and said, if I want to start doing something different, like let's say I want to get to work on time, where do I want to anchor that? Well, I don't want to do it right before I go to sleep, obviously. So it's got to be somewhere in the morning. What can I do that will help me get to work on time? And so let's say when I get up and I turn on some music just to wake me up faster. But the main thing is I have an anchor. That's the A. I then write down, after that happens, when the alarm goes off, I will. And that is you write down, I will, in a positive sense of what's the behavior I want to do that's going to help me reach my new goal. If I'm trying to go to the gym, after the alarm goes off, I will put on my shoes. You're going to say, well, I didn't get you to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
But by just doing one step, that's B, the behavior. And what Fogg has said is, if your motivation's low, because this is that second week and you've missed a few days, let's make the new behavior so tiny that you know you can do it. I mean, you may not know that you can go there and spend 30 minutes on some kind of machine or whatever, but when you get out of bed, you can at least put on your shoes, which is a step toward your goal. So he would say, make your first behavior tiny, okay? And that's on that graph. You would say, is that easy to do? Make it as easy enough to where you can say, absolutely, I can do that. Now, here's the third part, is the magic that I call it, and that is the C. So we've got the anchor, which is something I'm going to, when I get out of bed. B, I'm going to put on my shoes. And C, I'm going to celebrate the fact that I am moving toward my goal. And you go, what does that mean? Okay, so I'm sorry if I'm just running, but this is kind of fun to me. Celebration is something that we do all the time. We just don't think about it, but it is a scientific, biological part of our makeup. And that is, in our brains, we have chemicals running through our bodies. We know about adrenaline when you're fear flight. You know that is a chemical that your body releases. There's another one that is a celebratory chemical called dopamine. Dopamine, it comes through drugs, but it's drugs just excite the release of it in your body. When you celebrate, just like when you've done, when you let's say taken a difficult tree and you've had a lot of hard thought on how am I going to get it down, and the team executes it, the limbs come down, nobody's hurt, it's beautiful. You know how the team feels? They go, yeah.
Yeah, celebrate. Yeah.
You celebrate,
Yeah.
and there's a dopamine release. Well, when your team scores and your kids score a goal, what do? You boom,
Yeah.
great job. You celebrate, and that process releases dopamine. What does dopamine do? It tells your brain that what you just did is important, and your brain likes dopamine. So it basically widens a neuron track inside your brain that says, hey, I want to do that again. And so the more you celebrate, the more your brain, in essence, if you think of every time you do something as a narrow road, when you keep celebrating, you're widening the width of that road from a one-lane behavior to a two-lane, to where if you do it enough, it's a superhighway. And a superhighway is incredibly fast, and that's a habit. You're trying to get to where what you're doing is gotten so much dopamine that your body's saying, man, Chris, if you don't get up, I'm going to wake you up automatically. I mean, have you ever had that happen where your brain wakes you up before the alarm goes off?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a super lane in your brain that says, that's so important, I'm going to make it happen independent because I don't ever sleep. That's your subconscious brain. So, anchor something, start a tiny behavior, celebrate it, okay? And everybody looks at this and goes, that is so hokey. I mean, just putting on your shoes. Well, BJ's been doing this for about 40 years. If you think that he doesn't know what he's talking about, he first started with electronic signaling for behaviors, and the like button on Facebook. Well, some of his students basically figured that kind of thing out, and they took it and started a company called Instagram. That company, which used what they learned from Dr. Fogg in his behavioral class at Stanford, led to in 18 months, Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion. Not a bad return for 18 months.
Good.
BJ got tired of seeing how you could influence behavior digitally, and he moved his model 15 years ago into let's do it for people. So that's when I got involved with it and have learned from it. But it is a proven formula. And what happens, the last part of this is ABC. What happens after you put your shoes on? You celebrate. If you keep doing that, do you think you're going to move from just putting your shoes on toward heading out the door?
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause you feel good about it. Yeah.
You feel good about it, because his whole theory, if you get his book, Tiny Habits, he'll say people change by feeling good. We all know that we can use discipline. We can tell somebody, if you don't show up for work, I'm going to dock your pay, I'm going to fire you. Okay, you can use the fear method. It works for a while. But if you're expecting somebody to change their behavior, you and I know how many people have we lost in our businesses because we tried to use the fear approach and authority as opposed to helping them find something that makes them feel good about getting there on time. Because you're giving them saying, you get a dopamine hit by doing the things that are going to also make you some more money.
Yeah. So the reward, that's part of the celebration. Feel good about it.
Yeah, and again, we combine that with other things, like when you notice somebody who's been habitually late, you try to introduce this and they show up on time, what do?
Definitely going to have a, hold on, I was thinking of something, so ask the question again.
Okay, so, because we've covered this on another podcast. Okay, you've got somebody who's habitually late, and you said, we're going to try something new. We've already told you that if you're losing your bonus pay by not showing up, right? Mm-hmm. And that hadn't worked. They're still late, and they give you all excuses. So you introduce them to, and I sit down and I walk them through, let's develop a tiny habit, and I give them a couple of these things to do, and voila, they start showing up. What do you do as a company?
You got to celebrate. You got to tell, hey man, hey, I like the way you're, getting to
You
work
you
on
you,
time.
you got to
You
give them a
know,
little another
and
hit of dopamine.
and it's a little bit crazy. It's a little bit uncomfortable because you're basically congratulating somebody for what they're supposed to be doing anyway.
Have we had
But
that debate?
right,
Oh man,
but they
and
could
I
use that
agree.
pat on the back. It does provide. They need to know that they are seen, they're recognized, and it does help.
Yeah,
And it's just a few words muttered or a literal pat on the back, but it goes a long way with the recipient.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we went through this with some of your team members, and I was telling them the beauty of this method is you don't really need a degree to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can change their behavior if they want to. Now that, and the problem was, well, I need to do this, and all of us have this hang up that we think it's a character issue if we can't get rid of that bad habit, you know. And so we beat ourselves up. And all I love about this is all we're trying to do is help people do what they want to do because nobody wants to show up late to work and get docked pay. I'm just telling you, if you interview them, I think let's go get a job and then let me keep showing up late. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Sure.
didn't.
Sure.
But do people do it? Yes. And then when they do it, they start giving themselves that negative feedback. We have to be in the business of, unfortunately, recognizing behavior that ought to be automatic, ought to be a habit that isn't a habit for so many people. Otherwise, I wouldn't need to know anything about tiny habits because you wouldn't need it. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is most people have such negative thoughts in their heads that we have to give them more positive than they maybe deserve. But if we don't give it to them, they're never going to get it, and we're just going to watch somebody continually go down the road with these bad habits. And shame on us if we know a better way for not at least giving them a chance. They still got to do it. They got to get out of bed. They got to turn off their alarm. But at least we're giving them a shot.
So I guess a few things with that. If somebody's trying to get to work on time, like they need to kind of work backwards and say, like, what time do I need to be at work?
Yeah.
How long does it take me to drive to work? What happens if whatever there's a dump truck or a school bus in front of me, or there's traffic or whatever, to allow
Yeah.
for a cushion? And then, how long does it take me to get ready in the morning? Whatever I have to do, I got to feed the dogs, use the bathroom, get something to eat, whatever, and make sure there's enough room. If you're setting your alarm 5 minutes before you've got to be at work, you're going to be late. You're going to be late every day.
And here's the thing: when you just what you're talking about, Chris, is that, and Josh is a good example we can talk
Mm-hmm.
about how it's not just in the morning. Usually, the morning it's too late.
Yeah, yeah.
It's usually what you do the night before
Sure.
that puts you in a position when you wake up, you can actually execute what you need to do. Because here's, we've heard this. I got on the way and I forgot my lunch pail and I had to go back and get it. I got on the way and I realized I didn't have enough gas. And I'd left my wallet at home, and therefore I had to turn around and go get my wallet to put $5 in gas, and that's why I'm late.
Yeah,
I had,
yeah.
you
Sure.
know,
It happens. Yeah.
so you can't just rely on waking up and doing this. You can. You could say, okay, when I wake up in the morning or before I go to bed, actually, what we're talking about is what can you do in it to make it easier to do the things that you need to do or get rid of, as you said, the bad things that you don't do. Maybe it's when I get home, a tiny habit might be when I get home and I put my truck in park, I look at the gas gauge before I turn it off. Why do I look at that's so tiny? Because if I look at it and there's a light on, maybe before I go inside, I need to go put some gas in it tonight.
Or maybe even when you start the truck up and you look at the gas gauge, that way you could stop for gas on the way home.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you wait till the next morning and you realize you're out of gas, then you got to stop at the gas station. It just starts the whole day off.
You could say that the habit I want to is not running out of gas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the new behavior. Okay, let's look at all the various things what are some things you could do to avoid running out of gas? You list all those and you figure out which are the easiest to do, when could I do them, and then that determines. So it may be, like you said, I could put gas in on the way home. I've got money I've got my wallet on me and all of that. So when I turn on the truck, I look at the gas gauge. Just tiny habit. That starts it, okay? And so you get that going. And then when you put the gas in, what do you do? Or when
Celebrate.
you see yes, and I gave everybody, I've got a list of 100 ways you can celebrate. We all know them, but it's just funny how guys especially will go, well, I can't celebrate in public. Yeah, you do. You don't want to celebrate when it looks like it's hokey, but everybody celebrates. I do sit-ups in the morning before I come over here. I'm going, yes. Now I have to do it very low because I'm the only one up at that hour. But I will celebrate just because I need it to keep me moving to get from there to wherever I'm going.
Can you celebrate just in your head?
Yes.
Okay.
You can celebrate externally. You can, all of us know sometimes there's a song that comes on the radio and we celebrate. I mean, just because we love that song, even before we've heard the first 3 bars. Okay, you're celebrating. So yes, and guess all you're doing is whatever way you can do to make dopamine released. What BJ calls it is shine. If you think about shining, you don't have to say a word to shine. Mm-hmm. And that's what he calls it. It's that internally good feeling. You can externally bring it on by doing that, but you can just literally have a smile on your face, and it's going to make you get some dopamine.
So a smile, a fist pump,
yeah,
just in your head, man, that's great.
Yeah. I do it all the time, and I know my wife finally has realized I'm not crazy. I'm not excited about anything. I'm just trying to get through the day and keep the new habit that I've got going. And we know that if we keep doing it long enough, you go from being, the first time you do it, it's, we recommend you write them on 3x5 cards so you can look at them to remind yourself. Because if you try to remember your new habit, it's very difficult. I mean, by writing it down, it reinforces it. But I look at them, I put them in the tachometer in my truck to remind me some stuff that when I go home, I look at them to remind me to do it. Wherever
I used to try to remember so many things in my head, and then I'd be so frustrated because I couldn't remember what I was trying to remember, or I thought that I wouldn't forget, and it evolved into writing on my hand, and then I realized, well, when I wash my hand or I sweat, then it goes away and I can't read it. So sometimes I still do write on my hand, and then basically I transfer it into my notes or an alarm. But, those alarms have been great for me. I've got alarms for everything.
Yeah.
Because, especially let's say I took the trash out every day, that would become a habit. Well, my trash goes out once a week.
Yeah.
So I don't think about it. But Thursday night, I have an alarm that goes off that says, take the trash out.
Sure.
Well, there's my prompt. And then so I wheel the trash out to the road. But if I wait till Friday morning and I forget, then I'm driving down the road and I see everybody else's trash cans out and I'm like, oh, crap. And that's exactly what used to happen. So I said, I'll set that prompt. I'll set an alarm, and then Thursday night I'll take it out. It's done.
And again, that prompt is your anchor. Mm-hmm. When the alarm goes off, I take the trash out. And then now, with Tiny Habits, you'd be going, yes.
I don't remember celebrating taking the cans out to the road, but maybe I should.
Well, again, why celebrate? Because if you can learn the habit of doing tiny habits, it helps you start the next tiny habit. Because there's always going to, we're not doing this to just change one thing. We are basically showing you a process for you to continually get better. Because we all want, personal development, continuous improvement. We use all those words. Well, all we're saying is if you embrace this technique, you have just gotten rid of the glass ceiling that says, well, I could never do that. If you keep improving, you have no idea how far you can go, but it's going to be better than if you don't have a process for getting you there.
Okay. So something I read recently was that bad habits are easy to start, but they're hard to live with.
Mm.
Good habits are hard to start, but they're easy to live with.
Sounds like a Jocko Willits or something like that.
I don't remember where it came from, so I should probably figure it out and quote the author, but I just thought that was
so
huge.
True.
So true. And if you think about one of the worst habits you could have is smoking, I would think that's a pretty bad one. Well, that's easy to start, but hard to live with because you're creating all the medical problems for yourself versus, something like, I don't know, flossing your teeth or whatever. Well, that's a really hard habit to get into. But then when you do, you're going to have healthier, better teeth and, less cavities, everything else. So
I could do a whole podcast. My wife's gone to a biological dentist in Dothan just because of all the things I've learned about your mouth is someplace you really should pay more attention to.
Yeah.
That said, let's shift gears. What you're saying is bad habits.
Okay.
How can we apply what we've been talking about to changing the habits that we know are not healthy for us?
So I got to ask, what gets that bad habit rooted in? Because if it's the same kind of model, if I was to start smoking, do I celebrate the smoking, or is it the natural dopamine? Is the cigarette have some dopamine, in it? Is that what's kind of happening?
Yes, there's
Okay.
certain things. There's certain things in our body that trigger certain responses that make us crave more. Artificial sweetener, for instance. You think when
Yeah.
you're drinking a Diet Coke, why are people addicted to Diet Cokes and not Cokes? It's because of some of the chemicals that have been added
Okay.
in that. Now, I'm not putting down Coke because it's true in a lot of different ways, but there's certain chemicals that we take into our body that induce that.
Okay.
Smoking, they have shown that there are certain things about nicotine, that nicotine is a drug. And it's let's just say it's a cousin of dopamine.
Because nobody's smoking a cigarette and going, yes.
No,
But you're getting the dopamine from the action, I guess the drug that's in the cigarette from the
and let's just say
nicotine.
the motivation at first was high because most people start smoking to fit in.
Okay.
If you think about when you started smoking, it was to show it was something new. It was kind of risky. You were a teenager or something. You wanted to just, show that I can do something myself and I can fit in with my peers because, man, it's cool to smoke.
Or vaping. I mean, it's the
Yeah,
same.
now
same
now it's
thing,
vaping.
but yeah,
same
yeah,
same thing.
yeah, same thing.
It's a peer pressure that usually started in your teenage years when you're trying to become independent. And so you're not thinking, okay, I need to develop good habits. You're just trying to figure out how do I no longer be dependent on somebody else to get through life, which is your parents. Or if you don't have parents, you may start earlier. So a lot of that's that way. But there's also things like you have some experiences that are deeply rooted and they're negative. And because they're negative, you're basically beat yourself up mentally without knowing you're beating yourself up, and you start convincing your subconscious mind that that is who you are, and it's a lie. I told you, God did not have an off day when anybody was born, but it's amazing how people can convince themselves that no, I was the day that He wasn't around. Okay, and so a lot of what we have is some negative stinking thinking, as I put it, in your head that every time you do something, you get the celebration in a negative way. See, I told you couldn't do that, and it sounds crazy, but boy, do I know it. I mean, when I make certain, I've convinced myself I'm totally non-mechanical. And so when I'm starting to fix something on my truck and it doesn't work the first time, you know what I say? You are so bad, Rick. Why'd you think you could do that? Now, I know this. I'm telling you what to do, and I still do it myself.
Sure.
And so I know that's thinking. So now, because of where I am at this point in life, I go, that's not true. Now, I need instructions because my ability is I'm not naturally gifted. But if you give me the right instructions, I can bulldog it through is what I've learned. But my first mental thought just reinforces a negative habit of, well, you can't do that. And so people think, well, I'm always a screw up. I'm always late for work, or they go in and they try to basically make excuses for their own behavior because they don't want to face it. So they'll say, man, that company's mean. That Chris Francis, he just, he doesn't care. And they'll make excuses for their own behavior. And that usually drives those of us that are trying to be responsible pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Having said that, let's go back to the habit of smoking. You've got somebody that smokes, okay? One, it hurts their sleep, so that's probably going to cause them to be late too. But if you try to make it easy to do something, the reverse of that is make it difficult to do something, okay? So if you're saying, I will continue to do something that's easy to do even when my motivation's low. When my motivation's high and it's easy to do, of course I'm going to do it. But what about smoking? If I make it, I've got to figure out how can I make it harder for me to smoke. Okay.
So if your cigarettes are right here, that's really easy.
So I can put them somewhere where they're not easy to reach. I can leave them at home so that I can't grab them.
Okay.
I can take money out of I can leave $1 in my wallet so I can't afford to buy more than one cigarette at lunch, at a break time. And again, what am I doing? I am choosing behaviors that make it more difficult because I'm making the ability to do it harder.
Sure.
And if it's hard enough, and even when my motivation's high, I'm going to be on the don't take action side of that. And so that's how you reverse the process. How can you do that? There's, an example being a lot of people tell you they can't get to work on time because they stayed up watching TV. Or they got on their phone and they started surfing it and they got into Facebook or Instagram or
Next thing
TikTok.
you know, it's 1 o'clock in the morning.
And they're just,
5 o'clock comes
and they're
quick.
just surfing
Yeah.
away, and
Yeah.
they're just laying in bed looking at this screen there. And so, okay, and so they don't get enough good sleep, and they're tired, or the alarm goes off and they hit snooze. Okay, first thing, what might you do if that's what I'm doing? What would you suggest to me?
You got to go to bed earlier, so
Sure.
you got to figure that out. And so it may be that you take that phone when it's bedtime. Maybe you set an alarm for bedtime.
Yeah.
That's something you say at whatever it is, 10 o'clock. Your alarm goes off. Whatever you're doing on your phone, it stops. It gets plugged in, and you're no longer messing with that phone. Maybe even if you got a problem with grabbing it while you're in bed, don't have it next to the bed. It could be across the room. It could
Yeah.
be, whatever.
A lot of people have basically taken to where they take their phone and they put it in another room.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't, number one, they can't grab it. Number two, when it goes off, what do they have to do?
You got to get up.
You got to get up and go
Gotta
get
get
that,
up. Yeah.
turn off that
Yeah.
stupid phone.
Yeah.
You can do things like, okay, buy yourself some better curtains to make your room darker. Because if people have shown, okay, if you want to go to sleep and avoid that, make it to where when you turn off the lights, if you've got really thick curtains and that room is black, and you've got to wonder where's the bed. I mean, my wife does that, and I found that I've listened to enough other podcasts where that is one of the things you can do. But again, set the alarm at 9 o'clock to remind you, and put a notice in wherever you sit in your living room or on the TV. I go to bed at 9 o'clock. When my alarm goes off at 9 o'clock, I start moving to the bathroom to get ready for bed.
Yeah. You still got to brush your teeth, use the bathroom, whatever. You got to maybe take a few steps to get ready for bed.
After I brush my teeth, I take my phone and put it in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, again, after new behavior, and then you can celebrate as you put the phone down in the kitchen. You go, yeah. You may not feel like celebrating, but you still celebrate anyway.
But we shouldn't have to do that.
Right.
But we do get in habits, we get in routines, we get sucked into something. And so being intentional about creating a good habit, the good sleeping habit, then that's going to go a long way. It's too easy to just go, well, it happened again. I stayed up all night, and then, I forgot to plug my phone in. Now the battery's dead. My alarm didn't go off. I mean, it's just this recurring cycle. So in order to break that, you have to be intentional about it.
Yeah, and the main thing is we're giving each individual control of their life in a better way.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, when you say, well, why would you keep doing that? When you start feeling good about the little things you're doing for yourself, and when you're doing a new habit, even if it's just moving the phone and you're celebrating, something happens mentally where you start realizing, I do have a little more control over my life. And that little bit of step, what I have seen is when people start recognizing they are in control more so than they think, because what you're doing is you're attacking this, well, life isn't fair, somebody did this to me, that can't do that, and they have all these negative thoughts about their potential. And this is just a way to get you moving, because once somebody sees they can change for the better and they can also reduce some of the negative, then you can't put a governor on how far they can go once they buy into that. And all I'm saying is, you don't have to buy that, but if we don't offer it to people, then shame on us once we know. And I'm just living proof that I know all the negative thoughts that I had for so many years, that this stuff is now I can talk about it because I just laugh at them now. I hadn't gotten rid of them all. You hadn't gotten rid of all your negatives. Mm-hmm. But you know that, so you can look in the mirror and say, okay, at least I'm trying to get better, and I'm taking ownership of my own behavior. And that's all we can help any employee, anybody do. And when we do it, I'm just saying this method I've seen work.
So I'm thinking about parenting because all this stuff relates. But
Yeah, amen.
if I'm going to have my kids wake up at a certain time so that they get to school on time, and there's certain things that kids have to rely on parents to do. Like they're not going
Yeah,
to be able to take themselves to school. They got to rely on
sure.
somebody to take them. But if we are waking the kids up at a specific time to start their day, and then let's say it's my job to wake a kid up at 6 a.m. and I oversleep. Well, now the kid is late because I overslept. So I'm starting to kind of think through that, like when I'm setting the kid up for failure long term,
Yeah.
because he or she needs to be figuring out how to get himself to bed, get himself up, motivated. Now, as a parent, I'm gonna check up on that and make sure they're accountable. Like, hey, you were supposed to wake up at 6. It's now 6:30. You're still sleeping. I mean, maybe that's a little bit too long, but if it's my job to wake somebody up, then they're relying on me to do something. And anyway, I'm just thinking through that
Well,
process. Like,
and
we need
part
to
of that is
be getting them to do it.
what are you teaching them by your behavior? And so you're the anchor. In their behavior, when dad nudges me, I get up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's their anchor is you. And that's a toughie. If you're the anchor for someone else's behavior, then you better have your own system to make sure that you're consistent. Because that's the reality that we all do that. And again, part of this would be once you've learned this system is teaching your kids and then teaching them how to celebrate because you want them to feel good about the behavior, not oh there's dad waking me up.
Right, and I mean, this is my situation right now. And I'm probably doing it wrong because I wake the kids up for school, but then if I'm out of town or something, it's somebody else's job. You've got to assign that. They figure it out. But it's me. Hey, it's time to wake up, and then going back in. Hey, you're still not up. Hey, you got to get up. But I really need to be putting that on them to say, hey, you got to get yourself up, yourself motivated.
And so how do we
yourself
make
going.
that, so how do we make that tiny? How do we make it easy enough for them?
I think we just have them go through the process, figure out, work backwards and say, hey, you got to be up by a certain time. If you sleep all the way until 7, there's no way you're going to make it to school on time.
And again, motivation goes up and down.
Okay.
So point being is they may be motivated to get up one day, the next day they're tired
Sure.
and their motivation's
Absolutely.
low, and so the behavior we're asking for, they may be able to do it, but if their motivation's low enough, they just don't get up. So let's just say when Dad nudges me, I roll over and I say thank you, Dad, and then I celebrate. Not
But
getting them up.
I'm thinking that at this point they probably need to be waking themselves up.
Okay,
They need
so
to be preparing for high school, for college, for work. Like at some point you have to transition. It can't be.
Yeah.
You're not waking your kids up and making sure they're going to work and so at some point they have to figure it out for themselves. I think the earlier the better.
And so, again, okay, Noah, how can I help you develop the habit of getting up on time? So you're going to basically present them with the idea that I'm going to help you as opposed to I'm going to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're transitioning from a cop to a coach is what the analogy
Okay,
I've heard
I like
with
that.
raising
Yeah,
kid.
yeah.
That when they're young, you are a cop. This is the way it is because you're responsible for protecting them. They don't have the ability to make good decisions yet, so you do it. Some point you realize as the way we're developing, they start having the ability to make their own decisions and to learn from that. So you now become more of a coach.
Well, and what made me think of this is that if somebody if they're still living with their parents, which most people working aren't, but if they have a spouse, if my plan is every morning my spouse wakes me up, well, that's a crappy plan because then I'm relying on somebody else to get me up, and then if they don't wake me up, then I'm looking to blame them. Well, my wife didn't wake me up, so that's why I'm late. Well, that's crap. That's it, it's on me.
Yeah.
To make sure that I get myself up. Or if you have a roommate or whatever it is, and it's I know there are some times when people are really late, and then their coworkers are, providing a few extra prompts. They're calling or stopping by, knocking on the door, or whatever. That's a fairly short-term thing. That can't go on for a while.
No, and I think I've got a list here somewhere of the good news. Tiny Habits been around long enough, and it's all over the world. And I've got a sheet of 100 ways to 100 prompts you can use to help you get better sleep or to get up.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is you can design behaviors that get you going to the goal that you have, which is waking up, getting out, getting to school on time. With your kids, again, they can get the fact that if you help them start tiny and then you keep reinforcing it, good job, you're doing that, they will pick up on the fact that they're getting positive feedback, from you guys, from the parents, on they're making progress. So but you've got to design something that is tiny enough to where they know they can do it. And then because they're teenagers, they're still in that transition phase. You have to reinforce beyond what is reasonable because they're teenagers, or they're even preteens. Yeah. But good for you for even thinking of that, because again, the sooner you can transition them into taking responsibility for their own life, the better.
Sure, that's what I'm thinking, and that's where we want people to be, is responsible for themselves. We want mature, responsible adults.
Yeah,
that's and you don't get there overnight. You don't just turn 18 and suddenly now you're a mature, responsible adult. You're keeping the habits that you've had. You're keeping the, you've got to get there.
Well, you and I know, in talking about some team members, we've made the statement, man, this is like, I don't want to treat them like children. They're grown men. Yes, you do. Because the reality is oftentimes we've done less than a great job of what we just talked about, transitioning young people into fully capable, responsible adults. And guess what? If you never got that habit, guess what you carry with you the rest of your life, no matter what your age is? You carry that, I'm immature. And all of us are immature. I'm immature in ways. All I'm trying to do is reduce the amount of immaturity. And so, sometimes we have to go back and recognize that we're looking at teenagers that are now 35, 40 years old that never got what we just talked about. And so, yes, we have to go back, and in some respects it sounds like I'm treating them like kids. No, you're helping them grow into responsible adults, even though your first instinct is, man, by that point they ought to have it. Well, guess what? The reason we have to do this, and you've been doing it for 25 years, is because, no, most people don't get this.
Yeah.
Wish they did.
Yeah. Okay. So moving into habits that are probably a little more related to business, especially a tree service. There's some things that we need to be doing as business owners that we need to get in good habits of. But then there's things that, like, our guys and girls need to be in really good habits of. And one of those, and that's where we went down that rabbit hole of getting to work on time. But, we really encourage people to bring their lunch.
Yeah.
And so it's one thing to say, well, I'm just going to start bringing my lunch every day. Okay. Well, what does that look like? Do you have an extra 5 minutes in the morning to make your lunch? Is that part of your habit? And if so, that works. Or does it make more sense to do that the night before? And then where does that fit in? If as soon as you get home from work, you've got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do that. Next thing you know, it's bedtime. You've got to fit that in somewhere.
Yeah, and that's where thank you for reminding me about Josh, one of your foremen. Yeah. Josh came up with this without any coaching by me or didn't know about tiny habits, but here's what he did. He would make his lunch pail, put his lunch pail together the night before. Then he did the one thing that made sense. He put his keys in his lunch pail.
Yeah.
Why? Because he realized he was getting there, and he was walking out the door, running around trying to get out the door, and he'd leave his lunch at home.
So if you get all the way to the truck and you realize, crap, I don't have my keys. Yeah, they're in my lunchbox. So when I heard that, I was like, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so I was bragging on him, and he was looking at me like, what are you talking about? Because that is a classic example. When I make my lunch, I will then put my keys in there, and then I'm going to celebrate. Beautiful.
Yeah.
You know,
Seems like a really silly place to put keys, but when you think through it, there's no way you can leave your lunch.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to go open your lunchbox up, take the keys out, and drive off. You're there. You're like, okay, I have my lunch and I have my keys.
well, and let's shift to the other side. We know how many times in the morning crews are late getting out the door because when they get there, their truck isn't prepped or ready to go, or they haven't looked at the schedule to realize what they need for that full day because they got 3 jobs scheduled and each job has some different requirements. And so they get out and you get this call, well, I left that back at the shop. Mm-hmm. Ooh, how many times have we talked about that? It happens. So here's how you can use tiny habits. At the end of the day, after I turn off my truck, I will look at tomorrow's job list, tomorrow's schedule. That's it. Okay, well, what's that going to do? That's tiny. We're going to make it so small. All you have to do is to start with is look at the schedule. We know what happens when people look at the schedule before they leave.
They figure out what they have. So they say, okay, this one needs a spider lift. This one needs a special stump grinder, this one, whatever. So,
and again, we could go further and we'd say, obviously, here's the checklist, look at tomorrow's job. Yes, that's where we're going. But I'm going to make it so easy to start for somebody that's got a bad habit of not checking it. And we know it's a bad habit because of all the times we've had to go back and we're not on schedule because we forgot something. I'm going to do that. Or at the end of the day, when I turn off the truck, before I turn off the truck, I'm going to look at the fuel gauge. Do I need to put in fuel? I can do it at the end of the day just as easy as I can do it when everybody's waiting around.
And we actually want them to fuel up in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot better to fuel up in the afternoon, mostly because crews get in at different times. And then in the morning, we don't have a line of trucks waiting to get fuel, which is exactly what we used to have. We've got fuel tanks, and we used to have a line of trucks waiting to get fuel. So you're paying all those people to sit there and wait, for a spot to go get fuel. And then you have different people getting to the jobs at different times because one truck needed fuel, one didn't. It was a mess.
And or you can even have give somebody an alarm that goes off that says, when I get to the job, the first thing I do is I ask the foreman, what should I do first? Because you know how many times people are sitting there, they're kind of hanging around trying to figure out, and the foreman's got somebody doing here, and this person's just waiting. What if you started teaching people how to just, when I get to my first job, I stop and ask the foreman, what should I do first?
Yeah, and our guys have the habit that we instilled in them, that as soon as they get to the job, they put cones out.
Yeah.
And so their trucks, whether they're parked in the street or on the side of the road or whatever, the first thing they do is put cones out.
Right.
And then from there, there's a whole list of things, but we want them to have that habit. If they're not putting the cones out, getting traffic control and signs and things in place, but we want to make sure that just a few things just to throw out there. Want to make sure they have a job briefing complete, and so that job briefing is going to include things like electrical hazards. We want to look at that before we just go work on a tree and then find out it's in the middle of a power line. We want to find out where the septic tank is, if there is one, because we don't want to drive over it and fall in it, or set up an outrigger on it and then flip the whole bucket truck, or those things happen. And so we're figuring all that out before we do the job, where the emergency meeting location is, where the nearest hospital is, where a little prep in advance. Hopefully we never need a hospital, we never need a first aid kit, we never need, but it's there and we know where it is, everybody knows where it is, everybody's been briefed, and we know, so the other part is we know what's going on the job. And so if we just pull up to the job and start working, well, somebody's bound to cut down the wrong tree, somebody's bound to, hey, whatever you do, don't touch this tree because it's whatever. It was planted by their great-grandmother in honor of their dead child or whatever it is. And if everybody's not included in that, the next thing you know, somebody goes and cuts half of it off or cuts it down. So it's really important that everybody's on the same page on what we're doing for the safety side and the work order side.
And I think, a lot of this gets back to leadership on the foreman. Mm-hmm. That oftentimes at the end of the job, maybe there's a tiny habit for the foreman to pull everybody together and go through and say, are we missing anything?
Right. Sure.
Just because there may be somebody on the team that sees something that you don't see because it's not because you're not trying to be responsible. But again, a new habit may be to make sure everybody knows that before we leave the job, we pull a huddle and say, is everything done? Are we missing anything? And everyone goes around the room, and if they all say yes, you go, big time.
Okay.
And you go, you celebrate the fact that you did it right. So you can use these habits to make your operations more consistent, is maybe the point.
Yeah, and I know we don't do the huddle at the end of the job, but we do what we call a walk around.
Yeah.
And so in the walk around, we're making sure that everything got done, that was supposed to get done, got done.
Right.
And then B, we're checking to see if there's any trash on the job, something didn't get cleaned up. Hey, there's a water bottle, Gatorade bottle, whatever it is. And then C, we're making sure we have all of our equipment. So
Right.
we don't want to leave a chainsaw, pole saw, blower, rake. When we leave, we need to make sure we have all of our stuff, everything was done right, and everything was cleaned up. So that's the purpose of the walk around. But if your guys are not in the habit of doing that walk around, then they're going to miss it.
Yeah.
They're going to miss things.
And again, I think that's a leadership. That's the foreman's responsibility. I mean, yes, everyone should be responsible to doing it, but they've got the ability and the authority to make that happen. And again, what I would suggest is when the team is starting to do it on a consistent basis, throw in a little dopamine.
Okay.
Celebrate. Just make sure.
Well,
that
I
the team.
want to throw this out there because it's too easy for, say, the foreman to go, hey, did you get the backyard? And if somebody says, yep, got the backyard, but that's not a walk around.
No.
That's and so it's the foreman's job to make sure that it got done. And so, yeah, I trust you and I believe you and you told me that you did it, but how long is it going to take me to just walk around real quick and make sure, that it actually did get done?
You can do something like, let's say it's a 4-hour job. You can set an alarm every hour. You stop when my alarm goes off. I stop and I do a walk around and I ask the crew, where are you on cleaning up?
Okay.
The point being is, you don't have to. Sometimes you can clean as you go.
Yeah,
not
sure.
all the time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
but every hour you're starting to teach them. Have you done a walk around for what you just did this hour? Okay, and again, you can do it 4 times. You can wait to the end. Either way, I'm just saying there's things you can do to instill that habit of what a walk around is, that you're making it very tiny for them to do versus at the end of the time, sometimes people's mindset is, oh, I'm tired. Let's go to the next one.
Sure,
I want to get out of here.
We're at the end of it, yeah.
My wife will ask me, did you wash your hands before that? Yeah, because I don't really want to go wash my hands. I'm tired. I just want to go eat,
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that happen on jobs, that happen everywhere. So maybe doing it more often, maybe a tiny habit.
And the point I'm making, and all this interrelates, but if there's something left in the backyard, let's say there's trash or a chainsaw or something left in the backyard, then ultimately I'm not trying to figure out, well, who did it?
Right.
I'm talking to the foreman and I'm going, hey, foreman, your job, you didn't do this, you left a mess and you left a chainsaw in the backyard. Now, he can either go, you're absolutely right, we screwed up, we'll fix it, we'll figure it out. But what we don't want to hear is, well, I asked Matt to do that, and Matt told me he did. It's just what you're going to get.
Oh, I know.
Well, Matt told me he did that, and Matt said, he's a dope, and he told me, well, if you know he's a dope, then why the hell's he working, and why are you trusting what he's saying? But it's not Matt's responsibility; it's the foreman's responsibility.
Matt, after you finish your last cut, you give them a habit, and then when you do that, you then come to me and we celebrate. In other words, you don't rely on Matt always having.
And Matt's great. I don't want to pick on him. I just threw a name out there.
Yeah, I know.
But what we do want to do is when we do that walk around and we see that everything was done perfectly, we want to give him some praise.
Amen.
And that boosts him wanting to do it.
Praising people for doing what ought to be obvious seems like so counterintuitive. but it is so worth it
Yeah.
because we got to get Matt in the habit of feeling good about doing what he's
Sure,
supposed to have done
sure.
anyway.
Yeah.
But if we don't help whomever, then shame on us. Because
And it's tough because what I could do is I could walk around and I can find one leaf, and depending on the level of perfection that you're going for, but I could complain to him that he left one leaf back there, and then he's going to go, man, I just can't do anything right, or I could tell him, hey, man, you did a great job back there, if he really did a great job. But if there's crap everywhere, well, he doesn't get a pat on the back.
No.
He gets a, hey, you missed this. You got to clean this up. This is not the way we do things. When you get done, let me know and I'll come inspect. And then he gets a pat on the back.
Well, here's the thing. When you give people recognition for doing the right thing, even though they ought to do it without your recognition, they will start listening because they're going to say, okay, Chris is noticing me. He's noticing the fact that when I did it right. Mm-hmm. And then maybe they do it, right for quite a while, and then they screw up. If they've heard you giving them praise for what they've done right, they are more likely to listen and not get defensive and bow up when you tell them what they could improve on, because they've already figured out, number one, my supervisor notices me and he notices what I'm trying to do well. And once they start feeling good about that, they will trust that person, and when that person gives them some constructive improvement information, they'll work on it. Versus without that, they're going to go to, all I ever hear is what I screw up.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
And you and I have been playing with that one for a while because it's your business, it's your name, and a lot of our listeners, it's your reputation. And so you may not be there, but if that customer calls, you feel it.
Yeah.
And so the question is, how do I reduce those calls? And unfortunately, you got to praise people for what you're paying them to do enough to where they know that you're noticing, so therefore they'll listen and they'll make an effort to change because most of the world isn't giving them that positive feedback for doing the obvious.
Yeah. And it is tough to do because there's always something that somebody's not doing right.
Yeah.
But trying to give them praise and give a write-up, RIGHT, for things is tough, but it pays dividends.
Yeah, and you're working on the dream manager concept at your company. Here's the point. You're letting your employees know that you care about them more than just as an employee. You're saying, I'm going to help you achieve some of your dreams that are related to you as a person. Mm-hmm. Guess what you're doing? They will listen to the company when the company says you're not doing it right, because they know the company's trying to help them do the other things, and that's how you build loyalty. And so I encourage that because I wish everybody was as responsible as you and the other owners of businesses, because the reason you have a business is you are responsible. Unfortunately, if everybody was responsible for you, you wouldn't have any employees because most of them would go start their own business. And so you've got to basically work with the people that want a job and they want to do a good job, but they may not be as highly on that motivation line. Their motivation, if you're a 9, they're a 7. And that's fine. Great. Love 7s. Don't want to get rid of them. But they're going to need some help every now and again because they don't wake up every day at a 9, and you do.
So a few other things that businesses could do. So one thing is like calls, scheduling, dealing with clients, and your average tree service. I don't know. I mean, maybe average small tree service. The owner's doing so much.
Oh yeah.
The owner is doing the work, answering the phone, doing the estimates, figuring out payroll. Like there's a whole lot of things, but that process needs to get in the habit. Like it's a system, but it has to be a habit for whoever's taking the phone call that when the phone call comes in, we do this.
Yes.
And then we, whatever it is, schedule the appointment, and then we put it on the calendar. Like all those things have to happen, because if it's just haphazard, then things are going to fall through the crack.
Yeah.
And it makes the company look bad. It makes the person, makes you look bad. It makes me look bad. And so we got to figure out how to keep things from falling through the crack.
Well, and part of that, again, why do you do that? Because when you have a process, that's what we're talking about. And whether we, in traction, they call it the process, where every job has certain steps that you do, and you do them consistently every time. And yes, customers are different, but there's a process for what you do. What that allows you to do is to be more efficient to where you don't have to think, what do I do next? If every time you have to stop and think, what am I doing? That makes it very inefficient.
Sure.
So when you create that process of this is the way we do it every time, then you're allowing people to be more efficient because that habit of doing that, they don't have to stop and think. Your job, unfortunately, as a leader, is to every now and then step back from it and say, okay, is the process still fit with where the market is? Because customers can change. When you're dealing with baby boomers like me, you've got a certain way of dealing with them. Well, now we're moving into where the new owners are my kids. They're Gen X's, and they may have a whole different approach to how they do things.
So one example might be like you want a phone call.
Yeah.
And the new generation, they don't even answer their phone. They want a text.
Yeah.
And so if our procedure is call you before we're coming out to your job site as a reminder, well, you appreciate that, you like that, but somebody that's, maybe 30 years old right now, they don't. I could call you right now in front of you, and you go, bloop.
Yeah.
but they want texts. It's a little bit different.
And
so we
again,
have to make sure that system
but
works.
without the process,
Yeah.
if every time somebody who's doing that has to stop and say, okay, let me think, how should I do that? Then what you're going to find is you don't get much done. You'll never get the volume through your business that you want. If we don't have a process that says when I get out, I put the cones out. When I do this, I do that. Where you have that job sheet where you look at it beforehand, guess what? A 4-hour job takes 6 hours. Or sometimes it takes 3, but it's like, I don't know. And so how do you schedule that? You got to have a process. And again, all a process is allowing people to develop habits, and a habit is something you don't have to think about. You want people to do certain things.
And you want consistency as a client.
Yeah.
You want to know that, hey, the way they dealt with it last time was these steps, bam, bam, bam. And then you call the next time, you want that same process. If you go to McDonald's in Fairhope, you expect to get your Big Mac to look a certain way.
Yeah.
You get the same one in Ohio somewhere, and it's half the size or it's double the size. Like, it's not consistent. It should taste the same. It should be the same. And I don't want anything from McDonald's, but you got to recognize that they're pretty consistent, about things. And that's really what keeps them in business, is being consistent.
And maybe the takeaway for this is take a look at your business and say, what habits do I have currently now? What do we do consistently without having to think? Just like putting your hand up.
Yeah.
I promise you, every time you're going to put this hand up. Okay, you're not going to put the other hand up because saying, well, let me think about which hand do I feel like it. There's certain things that you want to have habits, processes in your business. And then the other one's, okay, what habits do I have when I look at that are keeping me from being better? And once you understand what habits are, and you'd say, okay, that's the way, the big fear is that's the way we've always done it. Well, that keeps you from seeing new opportunities, new innovation. Well, we don't do plant care, or nobody does that, so I'm not going to do it. Versus you may look at it and say, well, why not? And again, or if we do it, what do we have to do to where it becomes consistent and in a way that allows us to make money, that we're not doing something that we're losing money on because we didn't think through. But the way you get there is you've got habits on this is the way we do it every time. And again, maybe that's our takeaway for today. I'm thinking, okay, let me go back and look at every business that I work with. What are the habits that I see, and what would I recommend that they at least step back and look at to say, is that the way you want to keep going? Because maybe the market's changed a little bit.
So some of the things that I could think of that crews really need, the good habits, we mentioned some cones and different things, but like 2 hands on the chainsaw, and I know a lot of people will argue about that, but there's no way that you can cut one hand if they're both on the chainsaw. So
right.
we'll have an episode coming up that'll touch on, well, it'll be on, 1 hand versus 2 hand and how to fix that. But if we can get our guys in the habit of doing, keeping two hands on the saw, then they're going to continue doing that. Versus if someone's habit is to use one hand on the saw, then they're eventually going to cut that other hand or the other arm. Drop zone cones would be one. And so this is an OSHA and ANSI requirement. The area that we're working, if this is our tree and we're dropping things out of it, there should be a designated area underneath it to where things are coming down. Otherwise, the whole job site is open and anybody that wants to can walk anywhere they want to, and then as things come down, they're going to hit somebody.
Yeah.
And obviously that's going to be really bad when that happens. And so, we put our drop zone cones out. So before we make that cut, we verify that the drop zone cones are in position and everybody's outside of the drop zone.
Yeah, and you mentioned we had one the other day. Yes, you have communication equipment up for people to talk, but hand signals.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have consistent hand signals so that everybody on the team knows if I do this or I do that, they know exactly what that means, and they can execute from that. Because sometimes, the foreman's up in the bucket.
Yeah.
And you're down below. And so point being is those are those kind of habits that you want to develop to make sure that you're consistent with. And the main thing is that your habits promote better safety.
So in going back to Fogg's book, so he talks about like flossing one tooth.
Yeah.
And we say, well, that's kind of silly. Like, why don't you just floss everything? But he's just trying to start that habit. And typically, if you do floss one tooth, well, you're just going to go ahead and floss everything. You're already there.
Yeah.
But tying a habit to another habit that's, let's say if I floss after I brush my teeth, right, then I can say, okay, I'm going to brush my teeth and then floss. Well, I can put that together, but it feels uncomfortable to do that. Right. I want to floss first.
Sure.
And so talk a little bit about like how to set that up. Like if the habit comes before or after, or do we need to say, okay, well, let's figure out what we're doing before we brush our teeth, and then we do the flossing. Like
generally, you want to have a leading. The routine, the anchor needs to be a leading routine that leads you into the new habit versus an after the fact. So you could say, if I'm doing after I brush, then what you're anchoring it to doesn't make any sense. So you're always looking for what do I do now that if I put this after. So that's, you can have trailing that, do it the other way, but that's usually,
it's harder to get that habit started.
So again, when we go back to that start, look at your routines and think, when can I do this? In other words, you may say that after I get off work, I'm going to the gym. Okay, you can put it there, but the reality is you may not have a set schedule every day when you get off work. And you may actually have other activities that interfere with that. Whereas you could say, if I then say, I normally get up at 6. If I get up at 5, okay, I can fit it in. And I know that between 5 and 6, I have nothing on my schedule that would break what I'm anchoring it to, which is whatever time the alarm goes off. So, again, trying to do certain things.
So the habit, so just to be clear though, that habit, if you're going to work out before going to work, it's not that we're before I go to work, I work out. It's when I first wake up, my alarm goes off, then I go work out.
And
right?
I've anchored that behavior to something that's consistent.
Yeah.
Because that's where most of us get into trouble. We'll say, I'm going to do this at lunch. Okay, well, that's not consistent enough. It's got to be after. And the after has to be a routine that's done every day consistently enough for you to link it to there. You may say, I'm going to ride my bike to work. Well, that works fine if it's a sunny day, but you may have tried to anchor that to a behavior that the ability to do it is way more difficult than you thought. So maybe you're going to start something easier like, after I see the forecast, I will get on my bike and just start seeing if I can, do that. Point being is, you do need to look at your routines. And again, the exercise that I did was start writing down, and it may take you a week to figure out what is my routine. you and I have talked about having blocking your time to where, not so much for crew, but for leaders, blocking your time to where you can say, okay, if I'm going to be in the office on Tuesday doing this, after I get to the office, I know every Tuesday I'm going to be there, so I can attach something to that. Whereas if I say, when I'm doing invoices, but I don't know when I'm doing invoices, you're making it way more difficult.
Sure. Set it up. Well, and going back to the example of working out before work, like it still fits in the schedule the same, but your prompt is not going to work.
Right.
And
no.
Because it's too late by then. You're like, oh crap, I just forgot to work out. The prompt is the alarm, right. In the morning, and it's a matter of where to set that up.
Flossing. After I open the drawer where I keep the toothpaste and my toothbrush.
There you go. Yeah. So it's not.
I will grab my floss and floss my tooth.
So it's not. I'm gonna floss my teeth before I brush my teeth. I mean, that is when it happens.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. So my toothbrush is in a drawer. Once I pull the drawer out, then I floss.
Yes.
Right. So,
and again, you want to. I know it sounds like, oh, man, that is so detailed, but that's how you anchor it. It's got to be something that you're doing every day. Every day you're opening that drawer. Every night you're opening that drawer.
But once you do that for a little while, then it becomes a habit.
Yeah, and again, how do you make that first habit of that one tooth? Yes.
Right.
Or good job, Chris.
But hopefully people are brushing their teeth, but at this point you don't even think about it. That's just part of, like,
right.
If I try to go to bed without using the bathroom and brushing my teeth, I'm laying there uncomfortable going, all right, this isn't going to work. I gotta do this,
Yeah.
But because it has become, well, very seldom does that even happen because it's a habit. You just do
again,
it.
You're not thinking. You're competent at it.
Right.
It just automatically happens. Those are the routines. Those are the things that you can anchor to.
But that's what this is setting up so that you get the habit.
Yeah.
And so how many times do you have to repeat something before it's a habit?
Again, everyone has heard the 21 days, and that's a myth.
Okay.
A habit becomes a habit by being reinforced to where your mind says, I want to do it again. That's where the dopamine, the celebration comes from. So you want to make it so small that it's easy enough to do, and it usually depends on what you're trying to do. It may take you, there's no timetable, but it may take you, for me, triple the 21 days to get something to where I'm unconsciously competent at it.
Okay.
That I may do it, because the reality is nobody is perfect on starting this. You may make it so easy, all I've got to do is floss one tooth. I promise you there'll be days when you forget to floss one tooth.
Sure.
Okay? But you just keep going, and so when you're gonna floss all your teeth. Well, okay, you forget for 2 days. You're starting to feel bad. What do? You go back and you floss one tooth and you celebrate. It's okay to back up and make it go back to where it's easy enough to where you can always get started again. My experience has been, depends on what I'm trying to do, how long it takes, and then what I've learned is to forgive myself, because I've got habits that I do that I've done for 10 years and I still fall off the wagon.
But make it easy. If you're if you want to floss before you brush your teeth, then don't put the dental floss clear across the other side of the house.
No.
Put it on top of your toothbrush. Like,
Right.
you would have to move it out of the way in order to get to your toothbrush. Like, hey, there it is. It's right there.
Yeah.
Make things easy.
And the opposite of that is, I don't want to grab those cigarettes. Don't put them in your bathroom where you can have a smoke right after I brush my teeth, I grab my cigarettes and I
That would
light
be
up,
nasty.
or I vape up, or I go grab a donut or whatever. You can do things like, again, I had this incredibly bad habit of, because I was driving around and I always need gas going to see clients. Whenever I'd pull in to get gas, I could go in and my mind would be looking for Little Debbie. Didn't matter. I just wanted some caffeine and some sugar, and nobody's ever gone broke selling caffeine and sugar. And I wanted that sugar hit. So I literally, even though I knew it, I had to basically convince myself, when I get gas, I do not go inside unless it's to the bathroom. That's it. I don't, because if I go in there, my brain has gotten such a habit, and it's got so much dopamine from doing that's an artificial dopamine that I had to change that. So there are things that you need to do to avoid you to get out of the bad habits.
So one that and we talked about exercise some, but like eating, right, and it's too easy to just go, well, I'm just going to start eating better.
Right.
But you have to, and I think that B.J. Fogg mentioned in his book that he can't eat junk food because he doesn't have any junk food.
Yes.
Wasn't that him that said that?
Yes.
His refrigerator has fruits and vegetables and nuts, and I mean, he has, if he goes looking for a midnight snack, well, it's fruit, it's vegetables, it's it's things that are going to be good for him. Versus if you had good stuff and you have chocolate bars and ice cream and all that kind of stuff, then you're going to find it. And so setting yourself up with better food is going to make it a lot easier. But I guess certainly kind of getting that habit, and so one of mine is, and I don't have a whole lot of bad habits, but I like chocolate.
Yeah.
And my wife gives me hell about it, but I'm like, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs.
Right.
Like let me have some freaking chocolate.
Yeah.
But after I'm done eating, I open up the cabinet. It's just a habit. I open up the cabinet where the chocolate is. And
I know.
Get some chocolate. So, but if I wanted to break that, then maybe I could, put it somewhere else, make it harder to get. Maybe I have to get a ladder to get the chocolate, or I have to. But I'm not going to. I don't want to. I like my freaking chocolate, and I'm gonna keep eating it because I gotta have something.
But if you started getting into Bluebell ice cream, that's where I've got a freezer out in the garage.
Right. I'm putting make it a little harder to get.
I'm going to put it there versus the one that's right there next to the cabinet where the chocolate is, because those two go together great.
Yeah.
Yes, and again, the other thing that I talk about is you need to start writing down affirmations of what you want to do, not what you're currently doing. In other words, write down, I eat healthy, versus I don't eat junk food. Okay, I avoid, again, some of those is you can start programming your subconscious mind by telling it what you want to be, even though you're not doing it yet. I can write down, I avoid Little Debbie. I eat healthy foods. I can write that down. Am I doing it? No. Do I have to fight it? Yes. But I'm going to keep programming my mind into what I want it to think about, as opposed to letting just what's already there live rent-free and take control.
Well, I think we do have some clips from the presentation that you gave to our guys, so we can put some of that in there. We've got some of these slides. Anything that we really need to touch on before we figure out, we're creatures of habit, so we just got to be creatures of good habit.
Well, let me just point out what we talked about, and that is every tree that you work on started out as a little seedling.
Yeah.
Okay, and it grew into something big. Every behavior you have starts out as a little behavior, and all we've done today is show you some methods to where you can grow some mighty big habits that work for you, as opposed to just seeing what happens.
Okay, good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rick, again, and we got to celebrate.
Yeah, because I'm thinking if I go to your house, I can always find chocolate.
Oh, yeah. I can show you where it is.
So, anyway, hope this was fun for you. Thank you for listening and watching.
All right, thank you.
There's nothing new to me, all the same to you. No one else is looking through these eyes.